cern, cret, cert. Why, for the first time in all of the roots that I've presented to you, am I not committing to naming what this root means? Because, as you could probably guess, it's hard to name with just one word in English. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with a picture that is going to, that when I saw the picture, it did it for me. And I think it will do it for you. Okay, so first of all, let's take a look at the complicated nature of this root. So when you look at ancient Latin, cern, it's translated as separate, distinguished by the senses, mostly by the eyes, perceive, see, discern. Okay, so discern comes from this very root itself. So how can you define a word with the same word? You know, it's kind of not very helpful, okay? But this is helpful. It took me a while to realize this. That's a sieve, okay? That's called a sieve. Now, there are other words for it. Utensil consisting of a wire or plastic mesh held in the front. You know, when you do spaghetti and you want the water to get out of it, this and that, that's called a sieve. You guys know that? And what is the verb that you use in order to talk about what you do with the sieve? When you have some material and you're trying to separate, you know, whatever it be, the wheat from the chaff, the liquid from the solid, what is that called? What are you doing? What did you say? No? But you're on the right track with that. It's just a different word I'm looking for. Sift. Sift. What you do is sift. To keep it in the Germanic side. Okay? Separate is right. It's just, that's the Latin. Okay, so sieve. When you use a sieve, you sift. And that's what kerno means. Sift. Okay, it comes from the Germanic. And what does sift mean? I don't have to define it anymore because just look at the picture. That's what sift means. Okay, I love that. Sometimes pictures are more powerful than words, right? And sometimes there's not much of a difference. Okay, so that's what we're going to be dealing with. We're dealing with this root that means to sift one thing from another, to get the essence of something and to get rid of the noise, to get rid of the stuff that doesn't matter, that's not essential. That's what sifting is. All right? And kerno, cretus, so kerno means I sift. We're going to stick with sift, although it also means separate. It also means various other things like that, but let's stick with sift. Kerno means I sift one thing out from another, and then by extension pretty much perceive. I look at very carefully, very closely. And it comes from crino, and by the way, cretus means having been sifted. And then later, spoiler, we're going to turn the R and the E around, and we're going to get words like certus or certain. Right? So the result of sifting things out is to be certain. Kind of neat. And why is that? Through French. You're reversing the R and the E. Certus, that comes from the Old French. So all of these, both of those words, kerno and cretus, especially kerno, comes from krino in Greek. So here we have another example of a derivative of Greek in the Latin that leads to various derivatives in English from both of them. Okay, so krino means to judge. Okay, so you get words like critical directly from the Greek. So let's take a look here. When you discern things, or one thing from a group of other things, when you exhibit discernment, the state of discerning, what are you doing? You're sifting things away from each other. So in this case, you want an apple that is edible rather than poisonous. Let's pretend in our little fairy tale that green apples are poisonous. You're going to sift away. You're going to sift away the green apples, the poisonous apples, and you're going to grab onto the one red apple that nourishes you and that you don't die from. That's being discerning, right? You hear that all the time, right? Most people who use fancy words like that don't know what the hell they're talking about. They just use them the way everybody else has used them to try to act intelligent. You guys, not to get too elitist in this class, but you, by the end of the semester, will have a right to feel a little bit smart-assish about what you hear in the public. Just become more and more conscious of how little, if at all, people in the media, let's pick on them, you know, on TV and whatever, they don't have a clue about what the meanings of the words they're using are. Except they depend almost entirely, quite often, on the way others use them and others and others and others. It's like a game of operator, you know? And so that has a lot to do, by the way, with why there's such a distinction quite often between the ultimate meanings of words, and I say ultimate in connection with our times now, and then in the future it'll be even more different, and the original meanings of words built on the etymology. So it's good to know where all this stuff comes from. So are you discerning? Oh, yeah, I'm discerning. Oh, prove it. Well, and now you know what the word means. So if you're going to, in a debate, in an argument, in some kind of, contest or whatever, you can use etymology as, to put it not so, gently, a weapon, a debate weapon, and say, oh, this is what discern means, and this is how I'm being discerning, because here's a bunch of fish, and I'm looking at this one thing, this jewel in the crap, that is beautiful, so that's why I'm discerning. There's your answer. You can't argue with etymology. The best you can do is say, oh, etymology is irrelevant in this word because things have changed so much, this and that. But then let them try that. That means they have a better insight into etymology than you do, which is going to be pretty unlikely. All right, especially if you take the ball after this semester and learn more and more etymology on your own. Okay, email me at the end of the semester if you want a bunch of sources. I'll give them to you. Okay, discernment is the state of that, being discerning. All right, this is a really cool one. There's a difference between discrete and discrete. Don't know if you ever noticed. One is ETE, the other is EET, but they both come from the same root, meaning to sift. So how is it? So this dude is being discrete, and everybody who uses the word in this kind of context thinks it means secret, thinks it means not telling something or something, but no, it doesn't. Let's kind of edge our way into what it does mean. Below there you have two examples. One case, one scenario has two people being discrete, the other has them not being. What's the difference? First of all, let's just play a little bit with words here. Pretend that the one on the right is also EET. Let's start with that, okay, just to kind of illustrate how similar these words are and the fact that they come from the same root and that there's a connection between these two spellings. Okay, we'll get to what they mean by it being ETE on the right after we pretend that it says ET. So let's just pretend you have these two people meeting under the tree and they shouldn't be because whatever reason, I don't know what it would be. They're lovers and they're married and whatever, okay? There's a private eye taking pictures. It's stupid for them to be close to each other. That would be indiscreet for them to be doing that. And discreet would be them on the right. They're kind of walking by and not being close to each other. That would be using discretion, okay? Why? Because they have decided that that's the way to behave as opposed to the way not to behave. They looked at one thing, one option, they looked at another option, and they made a distinction between them and they cut out, right? They separated out, they sifted out the stupid way to act. Doesn't have to be a bunch of things. Just one thing is good enough. And they went with the one that's smart, okay? So in that sense, on the left, you would say that that's indiscretion, and on the right, it would be discretion. Now, let's go with what whoever it was who, in the image on Google image that I took this from, we're driving at. What is going on here? To be discrete in the case on the right, if we're not on the left, if we're not comparing these two as being two, the same people in two different scenarios, I don't know what they mean by discrete. Why is that discrete, them standing next to each other? I have no idea why that would be. But what they're really doing is they're making a distinction here. They're saying that the people on my left, and yours too, yeah, on your left, they're being discrete. I don't know how they're being discrete. Your guess is as good as mine. They're being discrete because they need to meet up, because they have information that needs to be shared, and everything's great, and they're doing the right thing. Okay. Whereas discrete on the right with an ETE means separate from each other. Separate from each other. Okay. So when you talk about two things that are discrete, you mean that they're separate from each other. Okay. And that's what's going on here with this little labeling. Discrete, cautious, or sensible versus detached and separate. But do understand that discrete with the double E doesn't mean what it does out of the blue. It means what it does because what you're doing is, like I said, you're comparing one way of being to another, or one thing to another, whatever you're comparing, and you're saying one is the right way to do it and the other is the wrong, and getting rid of the wrong. Away, right? Separating away, or sifting away, getting rid of it. As opposed to discrete on the right, which means separate, which means in the exact same, using the same root, to sift away. In that case, they're sifted away in a purely locational sense. Do you get me? It's kind of interesting, right? So they both come from the same root. They mean two different things, cautious or sensible, and detached or separate, for two different reasons. This is pretty rare. This is rare. You're not going to find this kind of example very often. And it has to do with history. It has to do with just the way the words were used, and there was a branching off of one use from the other. And it's important for us to understand that they share the same root. Okay, this is a really cool one. So, and boy, this Google image thing really is helpful to get a sense of what's in the air, what's in the collective consciousness when it comes to the use and the conception of these various words. This guy is writing down on this transparent wall with a marker the things that he cares about, he's concerned about, he is sifting together with, and he's getting rid of the things that he's not concerned with. So in a way, to be concerned with something is the opposite of one of those dis words, whether it be discern or discreet. Okay? So dis means away, con means with, all right, or together with. And so when you're concerned with something, you're not separating it away, but rather focusing on it. You see that? So when you're discerning, or when you're discreet, you're focusing on one thing, but the focus on that word is what you're excluding. See that? So I'm discerning means I know how to get rid of the garbage. Okay? When you say I'm concerned, the focus is not on what you get rid of, but what you're driving at, what you do think is what you should pay attention to and focus on. You get me? So in a way they mean the same thing, it's just they're opposites of each other. English is awesome. This is crazy stuff. All right, so when he says now, he cares, he's concerned about now. He's sifting with now. And those things that he crossed out, they're in the past. They're not the main concern here. Unlike when you're being discreet and you're saying, hey, stay away from me, stay away from me. The focus is on stay away from. That's being discerning. That's being discreet. Got me, you guys? So it's a matter of how you focus on it. And they're pretty much synonyms, but two different perspectives on the same experience, right? You could say he's discerning by getting rid of later, tomorrow, and next week if the focus is on them rather than on now, right? So they're really the same thing, but seen from different angles. All right, now, the first meaning, the default meaning of concrete is as an adjective, not a noun. So we'll get to the noun in a second, which we all know of, that we walk on pretty much every day, right? Okay, we'll get to that stuff in a minute. That's a particular thing that is concrete. Okay, so what does concrete mean? It's just pretty much the opposite of abstract. As we'll see, and by the way, tracho, I told you that we will eventually get to that root tracho, meaning to drag. Here's another example of it. The perfect passive participle of it means having been dragged is the tracked that we're going to get to later. But to drag away. To drag away is abstract. To drag what away? To drag away from reality. To drag away from physical, in front of you, empirical reality is abstract, when you abstract things. Picasso, he started out as a realistic painter, realistic artist, being very careful to duplicate things as they really were in the world. And then as time went on, he, among other artists, came up with the notion that a legitimate way to do art is not realistically, but rather abstractly. What does that mean? You're taking things away from reality and what is considered in some cases to be the essentials, the things that tip you off that you're dealing with a human being, but in a way that is creative in a different way than merely, from their perspective, duplicating nature. Okay? So that's abstract art. That's abstract ideas. Okay? Philosophy quite often gets into abstract ideas as opposed to more concrete ones. And so concrete, what's that? Sift with, sift together, just like concern. But as we're used to now, you're using the same root in two different ways. To concern yourself with something is to sift toward it, to go toward it, to feature it. And when something is concrete, you're sifting with in the sense of building up. You're building things up. You're creating something that exists in reality, concrete. Okay, so con, together, crete, sift. So you're bringing things in to a collective idea of something that really exists. Okay, just like construct, by the way. Construct means to build together. And that's the kind of together I mean here. Okay, bringing it together, bringing it into a pile of something or something like that. Okay, so concrete is sift with, sift together, differently than concern is. But they both are a combination of what on paper looks like they should mean the same thing. And what does that mean? It means that someone from Mars comes down, they're going to have to know how these two different words are used. They're not going to be able to guess. The word concern might as well have been the word concrete, other than the fact that concrete is an adjective and concern is a verb. But if there weren't that difference in part of speech, someone from Mars would have to know what's going on, wouldn't be able to guess it, and that makes them idiomatic words, right? And there's your concrete. Existing in a material or physical form, real or solid, not abstract. That's the first meaning they give, the adjective. And then the noun concrete, a heavy, rough building material made from a mixture of broken stone or gravel, sand, cement, and water, etc. Okay? So slabs of concrete. So what is this? This is one instance, and again, this is idiomatic. No one from Mars would be able to guess that when you use the word concrete, you're talking about this one particular substance on Earth. It might as well be, glass that you're talking about when you use the word concrete. Okay, and that's why it's idiomatic. There's no way to guess that concrete means concrete. All right, it means that you're building up things together, building up, sifting things together, piling things up into something that, in effect, you can hold in your hands, and it exists, as opposed to something abstract which doesn't exist in a physical sense. Interesting? Good to know. All right, criterion. And this is an interesting thing because the example I was going to give when I looked up Criterion was the Criterion collection, which some of you may know if you're movie fans, but it's kind of this vintage collection of movies in order to preserve them and to make them available to the public, some of the greatest films from the past. They call themselves the Criterion collection. And so Criterion, the definition, a principle or standard by which something may be judged or decided. This is a Greek word. This comes from krino. I told you guys that kerno is related to krino in Greek, and this is an example of a Greek word, a word built from a Greek root rather than a Latin root, but connected to the Latin root, cognate with it. And so a criterion is a judgment. Okay, it's a fancy way of saying a judgment. And so the Criterion collection is the judgment collection. In other words, it's a collection of films that those who have curated the list consider to be, judge to be the greatest movies in the world. All right, I think this is it. When you are certain of something, it means that the situation has been sifted out. It comes from the passive, and in this case, we might as well pay attention to the grammar, the fact that it's passive, the cretus, because cretus, at the very top of the slide, cretus means having been sifted, and then you turn around the R and the E through French, certus, and it means having been sifted in the past. In the passive voice, when something has been sifted out. So when you are certain of something, it means you've sifted through all of the options, all of the possibilities, all of the permutations and subtleties, and you've come up with the answer. You're certain. You're 100% certain. You look at all the variables, all the options, all the everything like that. And that's what certain means. And then you just play with that word, and you come up with all kinds of other words from it, not just these. When you certify something, it means that you are making it certain that whatever or whomever you are considering to be qualified to do something or other is in fact that. And when you have certification for something, and I just grabbed this out of the hat, look at it, it's Louisa Alcott, okay. But anyway, this is not a real thing. but professional educator certificate. Okay? What does it mean? It's a certificate, so it's something, or being something that makes you someone who you can be certain deserves to be able to claim that you are qualified to do whatever it is the certification says you can do. That's what a certification is. Okay, the state of that. All the qualifications, all the prerequisites, in your case, all the classes you have to take for your degree. Okay, you will get your certification that you have your bachelor degree once you've gone through all those hoops, is the idea. Okay, guys? Any question? Oh, yeah, last one, ascertain. It's just ascertain. Ascertain is ascertain. When you ascertain something, it means you make certain. You make certain of something. I just wanted to throw in a verb there too. Okay? Okay, now that is for sure the last one.